Ladies and gentlemen from the Daily Mail, Emory University protest descends into chaos as Georgia cops spray tear gas, fire rubber bullets, and arrest dozens of students. We are seeing mass arrests. We are seeing people, check this one out. This is a pro-Palestinian protesters storming in FIT in New York, the Fashion Institute. Okay. This is it. They're just taking over. You know what's funny is that... Let me just show this video for a second. It really does feel like, I think a lot of people look at this and they don't think much of it. They ignore it. They go on with their daily lives. One day, there will be 2,000 of these students in New York City in, let's say Zuccotti Park, and they're going to be armed and they're going to be wearing ridiculous clothing and they're going to bring former officials up with dunce caps on and they're going to mercilessly beat them in front of a cheering and screaming crowd. People need to understand that things like the culture revolution happen just with critical mass. That's it. There doesn't need to be a great awakening of the public. It doesn't need to be that half the country decides they're communist. It needs to be only that like 0.1% does, and they go out and they start attacking people and taking over. What we're seeing now, these protesters, I will say this, because certainly I think people are allowed to protest Israel, but I don't believe these people at large are actually protesting Israel. I think these are just, I think what we have here for the most part, while there certainly are people protesting Israel, I believe it's mostly communist leftists who are joining in protests for the purpose of seizing territory, sowing discord, and trying to enact some kind of communist takeover or destruction of our institutions. And the example that I give you is one, having actually had experience with Occupy Wall Street. One of my favorite moments was when there were protests for Trayvon Martin, organized by some young college students, and they were leading the march. And they were like, we're going to go to One Police Plaza and protest police brutality. Several Occupy Wall Street activists ran to the front of the crowd and shifted the crowd away from the police station to Wall Street so they could jump on the bull and protest Wall Street. Because the crowd marched in the direction people told them to go. Yeah. It's the same thing we're seeing here. These people... That's why there's that viral video of the young girl being like, I actually don't know what we're protesting. Yep.
No, you're absolutely right. You mentioned it doesn't have to be a large percentage of the population, just 0.1% or whatever. And that's absolutely right. I mean, or even 0.1% can be the people protesting. You just have to get a significant enough percentage of people to decide that they're unhappy with life enough to go out and start yelling in the streets. And then the most organized group within that faction always ends up taking over.
I think what you have here quite a bit is there's an element of the right now that has gone very, very anti-Israel. Mm-hmm. And so the left is now seeing an opportunity, an attack vector where they would face limited criticism. You look at the Daily Wire, and I don't know exactly what Ben Shapiro said about it. Some people have accused him, someone super chatted us saying, Ben said if you're an isolationist and you don't America first and don't support Israel, you're anti-Semitic. It doesn't sound like something Ben would say, but it kind of could be something, maybe it's misconstrued, I don't know. But we know that the Daily Wire is of course, for obvious reasons, very pro-Israel. But you have on the right now many people who are critical of wokeness, critical of DEI, and a lot of them are posting like hardcore anti-Israel content. So these leftists are now thinking, look, if we take this issue and we go and protest, we will have limited pushback from the right on this one. And I think they're right. I think there's like half of the right that is critical of Israel, doesn't want to be involved with Israel, and is not going to push back. In fact, when Greg Abbott said he was arresting these people for anti-Semitism, many people on the right were just like, that's hate speech. Are you nuts? Let him protest.
Yeah, myself when included. I was driving in tonight, I was listening to NPR, and they were talking about how cultural Marxism is actually rooted in anti-Semitism because it's against like the Jewish academics that came up with the concepts behind it. Like the idea that this is the label that they're going to pin to sort of turn the tides is very strange to me. And I think ultimately with these students, some of them, you know, really strongly believe these things on either side. They're very pro-Palestine or whatever. Like, you know, they're affected by, you know, fears of anti-Semitism. But my concern is that as we go into the summer, as these schools lets out, it could make them die off because the students have to scatter, or it could make the epicenters. You're starting to see these maps pop up, like Vanderbilt has an encampment. I think it's University of Minnesota has an encampment where all the other students in the area are like, this is what I'm going to do this summer. And the encampments become more serious. I mean, we're at this point where it could sort of go either way, but we know that this movement is spreading throughout the country.
So this is the Wikipedia entry for cultural Marxism. It says cultural Marxism conspiracy theory. That's funny. And it says it's a far-right anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that misrepresents the Frankfurt School as being responsible for modern progressive movements, identity politics, and political correctness. The conspiracy theory posits that there is an ongoing and intentional academic and intellectual effort to subvert Western society via a planned culture war that undermines supposed Christian values of traditionalist conservatism and seeks to replace them with culturally liberal values. I actually agree that's a conspiracy theory because I don't think that the woke left really do want to replace conservatism with woke liberal values or anything like that. I think they're literally just burning things down. So
the emergence of the right doing these, this anti-Semitism, everything. I think it's actually very simple. I think that there are a handful of people that are pushing that narrative. But what I think is that we've been giving Israel money for a very long time, and it's never been an issue. People are struggling to eat. People are struggling to pay their mortgages, and they want someone to blame. I think a lot of it is very simple. So a lot of these people who are now speaking up, I got to blame Ukraine, and Ukraine won't stop, and now we're sending money to Israel. I think it's actually a lot more simple than that.
They apparently now have another page called Marxist Cultural Analysis.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is literally cultural Marxism, but you can't call it that anymore because that would be anti-Semitic.
Exactly. It's literally the exact same thing.
But it's the co-opting of language, right?
Well, and you mentioned this, Tim. You just think they're burning it down. I agree. I think those are the same thing. The idea that you'd call it like a conspiracy theory that academics in the American education system want to get rid of Christianity and replace it with liberal cultural values. Like, that's what they want. They say that that's what they want. What are you talking about?
That's anti-Semitic, though.
Yeah, that's anti-Semitic, I guess. Oh well.
For some
Greg
reason,
Abbott's gonna have to throw me in prison.
But for some reason, being critical of postmodernism and the Frankfurt School means you don't like Jewish people.
Yeah.
So like, what does that make Ben Shapiro?
Again, this was like the
self-hating.
Listening to
That's
NPR.
right.
Like, if you're a random person driving your car, you're like, I want to be informed. I'm going to try and listen to it. You probably listen to NPR, and so you're hearing like, oh, cultural Marxism is actually anti-Semitic because it's a criticism of the Jewish academics who created it, or like whatever these two people who are discussing it are saying. Like, it makes it easy to learn that there are certain words that you are supposed to avoid. And I think it does misrepresent sort of people who use the term cultural Marxism to describe what's going on in this country who are not anti-Semitic at all. Like, it's a very strange thing. But again, it's an intentional move, I think, by progressive media outlets to shut down conversation and say, we're going to keep you on track by limiting the words you're allowed to use.
Well, exactly. And so phrases like anti-Semitic, racist, sexist, misogynist, at bottom, what these phrases mean are you're mean. And so when you say something that people in power don't like, for example, you point out that cultural Marxism is a reality, that all of our conventions and values have been subject to deconstruction over the past several decades, and academia has been pushing it. Well, they go, yeah, well, you're mean. You're mean for saying that.
I just want to point this out. Julio Rosas has this tweet. He says, the faculty and student walkout at UT Austin is now underway. A small group of pro-Israel protesters are nearby. So I'm confused. You have a bunch of professors who are critical of Israel, and then you have people who are claiming those professors are pushing, woke policies, racist policies, and that they hate Israel. Yet it's the people critical of the professors who are anti-Semitic when they've said nothing about Jews, and the protesters who and the professors, and I will specifically say the ones who are talking about Israel and not Jewish people. They are not. They like my point here is, it is anti-Semitic. It is hate speech against Jewish people to criticize the professors who are criticizing Israel. I'm just genuinely confused by who's opposed to like what.
It's almost so illogical it's as if it's all made up. It's interfighting.
There was a post from this former Vice reporter where she had like a video of a guy who was, I don't know anything about it, but they were launching like a Unite for Israel protest. Mm-hmm. And she was like, they're cheering on the anti-Semitism because it's a sign of the end times or something. And I'm like, I am so confused. The people who are pro-Israel are Nazi anti-Semites? Okay, I guess. I don't know. I mean, the country is entirely Jewish. But there are Christians and Arabs and Muslims who live there.
Exactly. This is what I'm saying. It just means you're mean. That's all it means. And both sides are standing there going, you're mean. And they're going, no, you're mean. That's what it, like when one group calls the other group anti-Semitic or racist or sexist, that's literally just two groups of people saying you're mean. Bring up an argument. Explain your point. No, you're mean is easier. All right, then you're just going to keep doing that.
And then you got the U.S. government being like, we want to occupy all of the Middle East and go to war with Iran. So let's just call everybody racist. And then if they get mad about our foreign policy, we'll call them pro-Putin. And then if they get mad about our Israel foreign policy, we'll call them Jew haters.
Exactly. Like, look,
we
want to
over
totally occupy the Middle East, and if you have anything to say about it, we're going to say that you're the mean one.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think this is the thing, though. They have created a culture where people are really afraid of these labels, and it deludes actual instances where there are problems or there really is true hate or something like that. It makes it so any kind of language is ultimately to shut down typically conservative speech and to make you back off from a position or to ask questions about something that you may genuinely want to know more about or disagree with. And I think using these coercive terms to suppress thought is ultimately one of the reasons that left college professors and left students are walking out, and all the parents and donors are like, but why? We didn't understand that this is what you believed.
Well, I learned something important with the protests that we're seeing with Mike Johnson threatening to pull funding, Mike Johnson saying Biden must bring in the National Guard and shut down these protests. I started to better understand. Then they went to ban TikTok, and I thought to myself, wow, I stand to make a lot of money by blindly supporting Israel. So from now on this show, we all are pro-Israel, no matter what Israel does, all the time. And we're opposed to these protesters. They all hate Jews and go Israel. And then, I'm going to wait for someone to give me a call and offer me money.
Check on the mail.
There are people who comment, they're like, Tim got the call from Israel or something. I'm like, shut up.
Is that what that red phone is for? It just rings? And
Well, it's not a call from
directly
Israel.
to Israel.
It's a direct line to Hollywood.
Oh. Tim's always like, don't unplug this phone. Don't touch it. Now I know
True,
why.
he gets really mad when we go near it.
Yeah, we had to install it after the whole Ye thing happened because they were like, Tim, you need to know who they really are. And I was like, oh.
They gave you a call after you had Kanye on.
They came in and installed the phone line. But who is they, though?
I think the deep state is effed. I think they're screwed.
If they lose this election.
I think they're screwed no matter what. The young progressives are anti-Israel. Like that is ludicrously bad for the American foreign policy. Even Trump is pro-Israel. And so what do?
True.
They pick Trump, but Trump doesn't want to go along with their foreign policy plans. So they're like, you get some support for Israel. Trump absolutely would go that direction, but then he doesn't want war with Ukraine. He's going to try and enact these peace agreements, and then we're not going to get to expand and energy and all that stuff. Then you go with Joe Biden. How long is that going to last pushing Democrats when their voter base is anti-Israel and opposes your foreign policy? They're between a rock and a hard place. They're about to crumble and fall apart. I do think it's kind of funny though that like they're going to ban TikTok over this. They want to pull federal funding from universities. They want to send the National Guard. I'm seeing even celebrity posts. This one's really funny. Like normies posting things like, these protests are anti-Semitic. And I'm like, wow. I can totally understand why there are people who are like, you got the call, and they think that's the case. When you see things like Mike Johnson, when it's like, he won't send troops to the he won't send the National Guard to the southern border. He won't send in, I shouldn't say he, but Republicans don't do anything about the mass riots, Black Lives Matter. In fact, Joe Biden supports all of that woke garbage. And then as soon as a social media app starts allowing anti-Israel content, all of a sudden they spring into action.
Yep.
But I think it's fair to point out the people who think Israel controlled the United States, I think are very silly people. Because I don't know why people live in this world where they think this tiny nation, which has been around for 80 years, controls the United States, which has military bases all over the planet and is starting wars everywhere and spending money on everything. It's very clear that it's just a vassal of the United States that we use to stage war in the Middle East. And so this is American foreign policy to wage war. The United States has been trying to take over Iran. It's part of they have a list of countries they wanted to invade. The U.S. invaded a bunch of them. Iran's not one of them yet. And they have a staging ground for it. There you go.
Just the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how we plan to do that at this point, though. Just with the disasters that we've had in the Middle East over the past 20, longer than the past 20 years, but you just look at Iraq and Afghanistan specifically, and you go, I have no idea how they could accomplish any foreign policy.
You just fund both sides and just wait.
I think the deep state's screwed, though, because it seems like the only argument they have right now is you're an anti-Semite.
Mm-hmm. You're mean.
It's like the only counter. Like when I see a celebrity post, these protests are anti-Semitic, I'm like, I mean, come on. Like, I've seen some anti-Semitism. I agree with that. But like, these protests are just mindless leftists who are on TikTok. There's like, is the only argument you have for what's going on that people don't like Jews?
Well, also, all right, if one group of people claims that another group of people is oppressing them, does that mean they're racist against the group that they claim is oppressing them? Because if that's true, then all of the BLM riots were entirely racist, no? Because they were claiming that white people were oppressing them.
That is the funny thing about the actual anti-Semitism. It's just like, it's wokeness, but replacing white person with Jewish person. And it's the exact same argument. I call it the Jewish privilege argument. They're like, there are too many people who are Jewish doing this, that, or otherwise, and they have a lot of money. And I'm like, it's like white privilege argument, dude. I don't care. It's meaningless to me. But if the deep state's only argument right now in the press, like if this is what the news organizations are pumping out, it's anti-Semitic. I'm like, is that it? Because that's not going to win an argument with these people who are on TikTok, and banning TikTok ain't going to do it either.
Well, then they'll come up with a new word. I'm serious. They will. Like, they kept calling everyone racist forever. And then when that didn't work against Donald Trump, they started saying white supremacist all the time. All the time.
They're losing.
No one was using the phrase white supremacist to refer to their political opponents, or almost nobody, until Trump got elected, right? And so when the anti-Semitic label wears off, they're going to come up with a different term.
I just think I feel like it's kind of over, right? Like, you know, looking at what they're doing with Trump, the Democrats and the intelligence agencies, the criminal charges, these peoples are zombie-eyed. Like that woman from Arizona, I forgot her name, where she's like, I have made the hard decision to indict these people. She looks like she's been living off saltine crackers for the past several weeks. And they're just like, say the line. And she's like, I have no choice but to indict Trump. They've become really, really bad at what they do, you know?
Yeah, I think the more you use terms broadly like this, the less weight that they have, right? So if everything out there it's why I like to use the term hate crime. It's why everything that happens in this room that I don't like, I call it a hate crime, because I think hate crime is sort of a weird, ambiguous term that I think is misused by the justice system. And so I've just decided it's something I'm personally going to hijack. There are words that you could use, like labels you could throw around, and if we adhered to them as being very strict, very specific in use, it would be a meaningful label, and you'd be like, wow, that person did this, serious. But if you just start calling everyone, you know, a bully, or if you start calling everyone a meanie or whatever it is, like, it stops meaning anything. It doesn't have
a long enough timeline, we're all terrible people. So I guess that makes us all equal then?
Yeah.
Well,
you know,
the idea of a cry bully.
I'm actually fairly optimistic now. Looking at these protests and the failures of the deep state to curtail the expansion of this like deranged ideology and like whatever leftists are trying to do, which seems to be just chaos. I'm thinking like, man, they've totally lost control. The fact that we're having this show at all, they can't control anything anymore. And it really does feel like their power is evaporating. As it evaporates, they become more and more desperate, but the end result is going to be the total disenfranchisement of the deep state, or whatever you want to call it. They're gonna crumble, and then it'll be interesting to see what happens. And then we'll maybe then we'll be able to do shows without being censored.
I think you look at BLM, you look at January 6th, look at this. Remove yourself from the political ideology, where you align for all three of those things. At the end of it, they are people assembling who have grievances at what's going on in their country, and they have a right to do so. And they should always have a right to do so. We have the right now saying that it's okay that we should take these people and arrest them because they're assembling against something I don't like. And they're going to willingly give up their right to assemble and share ideas. We're selling both sides in this idea. We're telling the left it's fine to get all the J6ers because their ideas are bad. We're telling the right it's okay to get all these Palestinian supporters because all of their ideas are bad. And they're both nodding along in agreement.
Well, it sounds like...
Or referring to some small criminal element within the protest and saying because of that you have to shut all of it down.
Yes.
The difference...
This is
to be
its
clear,
language, though.
Because we
anti-Semitism will be arrested. We won't deal with that.
And I just want to mention this to clarify so no one's confused here. This does not apply to the BLM riots because they were massively violent. Buildings were burned down. Lives were destroyed. But with this protest, I would say the same thing. If people who aren't breaking the law should not be arrested, right? People who aren't breaking the law should have the freedom to protest and say whatever.
Adam, you say that we're selling this idea on both sides. What happens if you keep selling this idea on both sides that they're both evil, they must be stopped by any means necessary?
Oh, do I get to say it? Civil War.
Oh, is that what you were going to say? Oh, I don't know. I was just curious where you were going with
That's
it.
Tim's slogan. You get out.
Maybe.
I think we sign our rights
tell
away.
you.
I think we sign our rights away. We're happy to do it because at least we're winning.
I think it is all of these beautiful ideas of freedom only exist in a security bubble. Feminism, one of the latest, wokeism, all of these things can exist because we have created security. But I got to tell you, when you're in the wilderness and you're dealing with, like, let's just put it this way. Let's say you, good sir, Adam, you know anything about outdoors survival?
A fair bit.
Fair bit. So you're out you're lost in the woods. You have limited food, water, supplies, ammunition, and a gun. And you're with two fat New York liberals who have no idea and have never been in the woods before. And they're arguing with you about what to do. You won't stand for it. There's no question. You'll say, get out of my way. You're a moron. When you're dealing with real survival, it's fall in line. But in reality, I think these people would be like, tell me what to do.
I went straight to they're going to taste terrible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, I tell people during Occupy Wall Street, the police would say things like, that's a frozen zone. You can't stand there. And then people would argue that if the anarchists, they would be like, there's no such thing as authority doesn't exist. And I'd be like, that's not true. Authority exists. And then they would make the argument, the police are saying frozen zone. That's not legitimate. And I was like, of course it's not. But if you saw someone bleeding and a doctor was there in doctor clothes with a doctor badge and said, I'm a doctor, you put pressure on the wound, you'd say, yes, sir. That's real authority because you're trying to do right. You're trying to do good.
This was Milgram experiment, right? People will look at someone and say, what the Milgram was,
right,
the doctors came in and they're like, yeah, I'll shock the person because this person in authority is telling me to do it.
Well, it's good and it's bad. But my point ultimately is beautiful classical liberalism doesn't exist outside of a security bubble. Same thing as feminism, same thing as all of these ideas.
Dude, feminism doesn't even exist when the check comes.
Right. So right now we're talking about this idea of you've got these far leftists who are chanting pro-Hamas slogans, who are chanting pro-Hamas. They are chanting from the river to sea and things like that. And worse things too. And we're supposed to say they're allowed to say it. And the argument is that we believe in free speech. So even if it's speech that we find abhorrent, we're not going to arrest them. But sooner or later, you are confronted by overt communists who are actively burning cities down, subverting your laws, taking over your institutions, and you are actually facing a real threat to life, liberty, and you have to ask yourself whether or not liberalism can exist in a conflict. So if you are in a civil war, and there is let's say you have conflicted territories, and someone comes into your territory preaching, telling everyone to take up arms to defend the other side. Let's say there's blue and red. No, let's say green and yellow, because we don't want to make this sound like politics. There's green and yellow. They each have 50 yards of a football field. And you're on the green side, and you're saying we believe in family, traditional values. And one of the guys starts screaming, everyone now, take up your arms and fight for yellow instead. It wouldn't be tolerated. You'd be like, those people are actively trying to kill us, and you are supporting them and trying to get our people to go join them. We're shutting you down. No questions asked because it's a life or death situation. The problem is liberalism exists when there's no conflict. And this is what we saw with the Civil War. When Abraham Lincoln decided that he was going to have the Maryland legislature arrested, and he did, he was going to create a corridor from D.C. up to Pennsylvania, I think to Philadelphia, where he suspended habeas corpus and started arresting people. One guy got arrested for no reason, just because they were like, we don't know, we don't care, we're at war, and we're locking you up because it's an existential crisis. We can sit here and talk about how we believe in free speech, even for those we don't agree with, and how we have to defend that. And unfortunately, I think sooner or later, when it comes to the point where these people are, taking over buildings across the country, firebombing them, and they've quite literally killed people, I don't know that we're at that point yet, but sooner or later, we're going to have to say, nah, we don't tolerate them. And that is the difficult question because they're saying the same thing of us, which I think just lends itself to, then what's the ultimate conclusion? People are going to fight.
I hope not. I hear what you're saying. There's part of me that's like, there's a lot of good people left, but more realistically, there aren't that many in shape people left. And it's hard to fight a war when everyone's out of shape.
That doesn't matter. I really do feel like so many people don't understand. The reason why I liked the Civil War movie, I would have loved...
I didn't get to see it yet. Was it good?
It depends on your definition of good. If you want to see a movie about a civil war, it's not your movie.
Was it entertaining?
I was entertained because I've done conflict reporting, and so I really loved how they showcased the depravity of journalists. And I'm not being cute. I mean that quite literally. When the main character, the dude, while bombs are going off and they're literally killing people and shooting them, he looks over at one of the younger girl journalists and he smiles and nods like, yeah. And then she looks at him and she goes, yeah.
Clicks.
Like, I'm not kidding. This is what they do. It's not about clicks. It's about these people love being there in the destruction, the flames, the fury, without having to reap the repercussions of what that conflict is. They love getting in the face of someone who's been stabbed or shot and just snapping pictures, and they go to their friends and go, yeah, they love it. They're vultures. They call themselves vultures. But the reason why I did like the movie, aside from how they show journalists to be depraved, it wasn't about what it's like. It wasn't about a civil war. It wasn't about the leaders of one government breaking away from the other government and threatening the president. It was about regular people in a civil war and what that's like. Going to a gas station and having a bunch of guys with guns and they're saying, you can't have gas, and then having to negotiate. Looters being strung up and bleeding to death, begging for their lives. See, people are going to say things like, you're saying, oh, there's a lot of out of shape people. That doesn't mean anything. It literally means nothing when you can't walk to the grocery store because you don't know if one guy is in his house looking through his window with a long gun.
No, I hear you.
And that was part of the movie too.
Yeah.
They're driving down the road and then all of a sudden they start getting unloaded on.
You have to consider also that 90% of people do not follow politics like we do. They're not in the know. Civil war breaks out. Most of these people won't even realize why we're at civil war. They'll just know there are guns, there is violence. I'm going to survive and take care of my own.
And there's a scene in the movie, it's in the trailer actually, where the journalists, there's two guys and they're laying on the ground and one guy, that's the sniper rifle, and one guy's, I don't know what it's called, but one guy's like tracking with binoculars, the other guy's shooting, and they're like, what's going on? And it's like, the guy looks at her and he's like, someone is shooting at us. And then there's a pause and then the guy asks again, he's like, well, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, you're stupid. Someone is trying to kill us. We are trying to kill him. They don't know who it is. And they're like, you don't know it? No, you have no idea. And this is true for war in general. People don't get it. Friendly fire is common.
Yeah, they're not going to pass out uniforms and flags, but we might be able to recognize them by their masks.
It's not just that. It's that you're going to hear a gunshot and you're going to hit the deck. And then you don't know. For all there could be two Trump supporters wearing gear and they're not going to know they're two Trump supporters. There could be Antifa and some other leftist faction. They don't know who each other are. It doesn't matter. It's just going to be chaos.
Yeah, my argument is that I don't even think it's going to be based on ideology for the majority of people. I think it's going to be based on survival. If it really does get kinetic like that and cities are burning, again, most people don't follow politics. They don't really have a side. They just know there is chaos and I'm going to survive.
And then it's going to, factionalism in conflict like this is it's not going to be ideological. It's going to be brand. It's going to be someone saying like, look, all I know is those guys are the bad guys.
Yep.
Don't care what you think or why. It will immediately break down into the leaders of one side are going to say, the funny thing is, if it really came down to a conflict between the woke left and the Trump supporters, the left would have you believe that the right and the MAGA people would be racist, white supremacist, only white people, no trans people. Quite literally not true. Both factions will be multi-ethnic and diverse, although I think the left will have more elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's going to be white liberals. It's going to be the same thing. And ultimately what it comes down to is it's going to be people just taking territory and not caring what your name is, who you are, what your beliefs are. They're going to say, are you in conflict or combat or not?
We just got to secure the hormone replacement drugs. That's how we win.
None of that will even exist. That will evaporate from culture in 2 seconds in a conflict. All of these isms and all of these beliefs and all these worldviews only exist in the refined machine. As soon as the machine breaks down and you can't get mouthwash anymore, dental hygiene is gone. And there's not going to be people being like, we have to secure the Listerine factory. No, they're going to be like, do we have the river? How are our people drinking water? And then they're going to be like, the other side came in the middle of the night and torched a wheat field. It's people. I don't think people understand. They live in a world of movies and video games, and it's kind of wild to think about. Look at the photos and videos from Aleppo, and there's a guy walking down the street in rubble with a grocery bag. Yeah, he went to the grocery store. He bought groceries. They were expensive groceries, but he did, and that happens. And people seem to think that it doesn't. In Damascus, at the height of the civil war, there were nightclubs. There's a sarin gas attack a few miles away from the nightclub, and people were just there partying. Like, what are you going to do? Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.